Back to our top story. A South Korean court has cancelled President Yoon Suk Yeol's arrest warrant, but the leader still remains in jail, with the prosecution likely to appeal the ruling. Now, for more analysis, we're joined by Yongwook Ryu, Assistant Professor of International Politics at the Kuan School of Public Policy, speaking to us live from Singapore. Professor, welcome to the program. First, I want to get your thoughts on the basis of the ruling. The court ruled that prosecutors violated procedural rules by holding Mr. Yoon in detention longer than legally allowed before indicting him last month. From then till now, what factors could have been at play to lead us to today's ruling? How did we get here?
I'm sure that you recall the dramatic attempt to arrest President Yoon by the Corruption Investigation Office about 2 months ago in January this year. Today's court's decision is essentially reversing that by saying that the arrest warrant and attempt was unlawful as the CIO, the Corruption Investigation Office, didn't have the legal mandate to investigate and arrest the president over the crime of insurrection. In addition, as your report mentioned, the court also found that the prosecutor's subsequent indictment of President Yoon, which was made later in that month in January 2025, was made after the arrest warrant had expired, and hence it was also unlawful, and therefore Yoon has to be released. Now, I think that this is actually the correct legal decision, as CIO clearly stepped over its jurisdiction to go after president when it did not have the clear legal jurisdiction to investigate and arrest the president over the crime of insurrection. And for all other possible crimes that president may have committed, there's presidential immunity that applies. And hence, the president cannot be investigated and tried. And thus, the president was not to be subject to investigation until he loses his public office of presidency. In hindsight, I think what happened was that when there was a power vacuum in Korean domestic politics, some actors, such as the chief of CIO, saw opportunity to play politics rather than stick to legal principles and due procedures for possibly personal career advancement, and hence overstepped the legal boundaries, and therefore blew up the necessary legal procedure to interrogate the president for what went on in one of the most bizarre and important political events in post-democratization history of South Korea. And later, the prosecutor's office might need to try the president for the crime of insurrection without having any formal investigation session with the president himself. And therefore, whatever justice that might prevail in the end will only be partial and will be politicized and disputed.
Professor, yes, as you said, it is a bizarre, unprecedented case. The court also said that the agency that detained Mr. Yoon before his formal arrest did not have legal rights to investigate the insurrection charges. What are your thoughts on the handling of such procedural matters? Does it change anything fundamentally or have an impact on the legitimacy of the future ruling on Mr. Yoon's insurrection charges?
Right. I think that it won't affect the Constitutional Court proceedings that much, as the Constitutional Court proceedings are quite different from criminal proceedings. However, one way it could affect it is that whatever evidence gathered by the Corruption Investigation Office against the president will now have to be considered as inadmissible in the court, given that the arrest of President Yoon by CIO from the very beginning itself was unlawful. Now, how the Constitutional Court judges will look at this issue remains to be seen. Even if it won't affect Yoon's trials at the Constitutional Court, my view is that it will surely affect or have a major impact on the potential presidential election if the Constitutional Court upholds Yoon's impeachment. Not only could it delay the final verdict on Yoon by the Constitutional Court by a week or so, but also Yoon's supporters will have a greater reason to be mobilized to come together in support of President Yoon with today's court decision that his arrest itself was unlawful. Now, the delay of the final decision by the Constitutional Court becomes quite relevant because it is not only President Yoon who faces criminal charges, but the main opposition presidential candidate, Lee Jae-myung, also faces his own criminal investigation charges, And he's already found guilty at the district court level. And the appeal court's decision on Lee is expected to come out on 26 March.
All right, Professor, for the sake of time, I apologize for interrupting you there. For the sake of time, for now, it remains uncertain if Mr. Yoon will be freed from the detention center where he is being held. We understand prosecutors have a week to appeal the ruling. What are the possible scenarios we can expect?
I'll be surprised that if the prosecutors will appeal, because the Constitutional Court previously found that if the court nullifies the arrest warrant, then the prosecutors appeals against it, then that decision to appeal could constitute unlawful, unconstitutional. So I'll be surprised if the prosecutors will appeal. But even if it decides to appeal, I think at the appeal court, it might go up to the Supreme Court. I think the court will strike down that the original arrest warrant was unlawful. And therefore, that will only strengthen Yoon's supporters. And I don't think the prosecutors will run that political risk.
All right, Professor, we appreciate your insights. Yongwook Ryu, Assistant Professor of International Politics at the Kuan School of Public Policy. Thank you.